Hi Algebra 2, Copper Canyon, it's Miss Castro. I know you guys are working on Edgenuity right now and you're looking at lessons and trying to move through with the trig unit. I thought I'd throw together a few videos myself just to show you how I would have explained some of the topics, and maybe it'll help you a little bit more. So we're going to start off with 9.1, angles in standard position. That should be the very first lesson that you run into for the trigonometric unit. And so I really want to start off with just, there's a lot of vocabulary in this unit that is crucial. If you don't understand the words and what they represent in terms of angles, it could be an issue. So one of the things I want to start off with is reminding you about a quadrant. It's called a quadrant for the reason of quad means four, right? But remind yourself where the quadrants are. So here's this blank quadrant. So remember, quadrants always start in the upper right-hand corner. So quadrant 1 is actually right here in the upper corner. Now they're not going to use a 1, they're probably going to use this I-looking symbol for the Roman numeral 1. You want to get used to that as well. Now which direction does it go from here? Most commonly thinking, you would think, oh, it's going to go clockwise, right? But no. It's not. It's going to go counterclockwise. So this is one of the things you really want to make sure you remember and that you keep straight throughout this unit. So quadrant 1 is upper left, then it's going to move in a counterclockwise direction. Quadrant 2, quadrant 3, continuing with the movement. And then lastly, quadrant 4, back to the beginning. Now the other thing is you want to get used to these Roman numerals because that's probably what they're going to use during your assignments, your lessons. You want to make sure you understand how those are working. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is movement. How do you create an angle? So in your vocabulary, you probably ran into something called standard position. Standard position is basically just telling you it's standard. It's typical. This is how it always happens. Like when you say, oh yeah, air conditioning comes standard with cars in Arizona. It always comes that way. That's the way it's made nowadays. So standard position is important when you're making angles because angles always start from the same location. And when you're talking about a quadrant like this, you want to make sure that you understand that standard position always starts on this positive side of the x-axis, always. So this is standard. This is where they always start, standard starts. So one of the things that I was thinking of showing you guys, can you hand me that fan over there, is just a little bit about like angles and how they're measured. So here's a quick little example. I stole this from my daughter, by the way. So she has this little fan, right? And so when you're looking at making an angle, make sure I have this right. When you're making an angle, I think of it, you know, if you think of this little fan being here at standard position, it really does tell you the angle that it makes. So if you're making a positive angle, it has to turn clockwise. So you'd open the fan and say, hey, look, I just made a positive 90-degree angle, right? So you make angles thinking of it like that. You could say, oh, I want to make a 180-degree angle, but in the positive direction. So positive 180-degree angle, right? So you just made a positive 180-degree angle by rotating the fan in a counterclockwise motion. That's positive 180. You could go even further and say, oh, I want to make a 270. That's another 90. So if you take your fan and you move it in the counterclockwise direction, but 3/4 of a turn, it would look something like that. That's a 270-degree angle, positive 270-degree angle. So the direction that you're turning is very important because the motion that you make with your angle is telling you if it's a positive or a negative angle. Most commonly, obviously, you could go a full turn. So a full turn making an angle would be all the way to the beginning, which you could do, and you would just basically complete the whole circle. That's a positive 360-degree turn right there, okay? Now, the weird thing about all this is that I just said you're moving in a counterclockwise motion to make a positive angle. Sounds kind of weird because you're thinking counterclockwise positive, but that's one of the things you're going to have to get used to in this unit. You can also make negative angles, but negative angles have to move in a clockwise motion. So I have some vocabulary here for you. So you can also create negative angles, but you have to create the angle using the opposite direction. That's a clockwise motion. You're still starting in this standard position, which is right here, okay? But now you have to think in a different turning sense. So you're still starting to make your angle from the same location right here, but now you're moving it in a clockwise motion. This is going to produce a negative angle. Same thing, you could make a negative 90-degree angle simply by starting here, but moving in a clockwise position. Technically, that is a negative 90-degree angle right there. And same thing, you want to make a negative 270-degree angle, so then you got to do 3/4 of a turn, but in a clockwise motion. So here we go. So you're keeping it here, and you're going to go a full 3/4 of a turn, and voila, that is a negative 270-degree angle right there, because you turned it 3/4 of a full turn, and you went in a clockwise motion. So one other thing that you want to keep in mind throughout this whole unit is you really do want to memorize some of those key angles I said, like 90 is a quarter turn, 180 is a half turn, 3/4 of a turn will give you a 270-degree angle, or 270-degree angle. I know that's kind of a weird one, but one to keep in mind. And then obviously 360 and 100 and 0. Technically 0 is this same spot, and it also is 360, because if you make a full turn, you basically end up in the same spot. This brings in the last vocabulary word that I want to emphasize with you guys. So we talked about standard position. That means that all your angles start at this location every time. That's what's standard about it. It always starts there. We talked about counterclockwise. Counterclockwise will always produce a positive angle of some sort, okay? We talked about clockwise. Clockwise will produce a negative angle of some sort, okay? The last thing we want to talk about is something called terminal side. So when you're creating angles, you want to let people know, hey, I'm done making my angle. I'm done, that's it. So terminal side means exactly the way it sounds. Terminal means terminate. It's going to end. And that's the key word that I've underlined here for you guys here. It means where does your angle end and where does it end at. So again, going back to the board with the fan. So here we go again. Let's go ahead and make an angle. I'm going to make the angle real quick. Now, if I make this angle, that is a positive 90-degree angle, but look at where it terminated. It ended right here. This side is called the terminal side because this is where the angle actually stopped. Not this side. Remember, this is the starting side. That's always there. You're looking at this side right here. Where did it stop? It stopped right here, right along the y-axis. Okay? Let's do some imagining here. So like, I'm going to make up some angles here. They're not going to be exact. We're just using our estimating skills here. So we know 90 is a quarter turn. We know 180 is a half turn. And we know 270 is 3/4 of a turn. So I'm going to make an angle, and we're going to kind of estimate where it terminates at. Also, what quadrant it terminates it at. So here we go. So getting my lovely fan here again. So here's my fan. I'm starting in standard position right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and give it a quick turn. Boom. Let's say I decided to terminate there. Now think about that. My angle is ending right here. Okay? Let's guesstimate that angle. We know it's above 90, and we know it's like somewhere maybe between the 90 and the 180 mark. Let's go ahead and call it 120. So we can say that this is an angle of 120 degrees, and that it terminates right there. This is what we call the terminal side. Okay? The other thing they may ask you is quadrant. What quadrant does it terminate in? Well, it's easy if you label. Clearly, this 120-degree angle I kind of estimated here terminates in the quadrant 2, or quad 2, and it's called the terminal side. Okay? I hope that helps, at least with understanding angle measures. Remember, if you have any questions, you can always send me emails, or you can send me a message on Remind, and I'll help you as much as I can. Good luck, Algebra 2.